Rolling on with the shop content today. I'm gonna get the boost torn back apart a little bit. Like I'd mentioned, or at least I think I mentioned earlier in a couple videos, that the cylinder head has a couple porous cracks in it. Not necessarily cracks, just, yeah, porous pinholes where at room temperature it leaves about a dime-sized coolant droplet on top of the head all the time. When it gets up to temperature, it seals and it's fine, but in the shop, it's always leaving a little bit of coolant on top of the cylinder head. So, naturally, called up Devin at Indy Specialties, got one of their billet FlowMaster heads for it. Got to yank this apart. I'm gonna try to siphon some coolant out so I don't make a mess all over the floor. Slap this head on, and that'll be that. But I'm gonna do, you know, a nice install video on how that whole process goes. So let's get into it. So we got our cylinder head in the box here, and then I've got this other box with some more clutching parts and stuff, which I'll get into in the next video. But yeah, Indy Specialty boxes everywhere. FlowMaster head box here, all packaged up, tons of bubble wrap, super safe. Instruction sheet. You get some bolts. These have O-rings to seal in the head instead of using RTV like the factory head does, so that's a nice little upgrade. And here, I need to not drop the domes. We've got this beautiful piece right here. So it's nice, it comes with your barbs already threaded and Teflon taped into the head, so you don't have to worry about doing that. Fancy domes, you can have them make pretty much any dome size or, you know, CC chamber, whatever you want, they can do. I have two old plugs here, one of which is one of the broken insulator ones, but use these to move the head around by the domes so that way they don't fall out when we're moving this thing all around. So it comes with the O-rings already on the dome here. I'm just covering up some engravings and stampings. And you can see we've got a lot more cooling capacity inside this bad boy. So hopefully it helps this Assault run a little bit cooler because she's always been a little warm-blooded. Yep, I'm gonna let this sit right here and start pulling the sled apart. Before I pull that coolant temp sensor out, this is the leak drippage I'm talking about right here. It's always got that when it sits at room temperature, and then it leaks into this well here, and you can see some of the discoloration down through there. I've looked around online, and there are a few other people with 850 NA engines that have reported a porous casting like that, so it's not unheard of, but it is definitely not a common thing, but it does happen. See, I got this thing all cattywampus tilted up on the lift here, trying to get as much coolant as I can to run back into the tunnel. I was gonna try and mighty vac and suck a bunch of the coolant out through the coolant bottle, but they have a screen inside there, so I can't get into any of the actual hoses in terms of like the lower hoses that feed either the cooler or the engine. So I said, well, I'll just pick the back of it up because I'm gonna need it in this position to kind of run it and bleed it anyway. Here we are with it all on the lift, jacked up. The rear of the tunnel is ratchet strapped down so that, you know, it just creates as much angle as possible. I'm gonna go ahead and start pulling hoses and pull the head off. Hopefully I don't make too much of a mess, but it's gonna be what it's gonna be at this point. Got the main feed hose ready to come off of here. I'm gonna try to fish this rag in underneath it, try to catch some coolant if there's any left. I got some caps ready in my pocket. Yep, okay, nothing in it. I don't know why it runs hot all the time. Ain't got no coolant, bub.
Jesus.
Huh?
Good. Nothing.
Talking to me?
Yeah, good thing I'm checking over stuff now.
Oh my God, you don't start with me.
You never put any in it since you loaned it.
Yeah, but I've always checked it. Even right now, it's not that much under
there. But yeah, that's like the typical thing with the cars. If you can't create a vacuum, right, because it has a leak, you can't pull out of the overflow.
That's what I said in the thing. You know, it's like, yeah, I know better and should have checked it, but like, when you bring it in and you go, oh yeah, it's just a tiny little leak and the coolant level appears fine. I got so much other shit going on. It's not like I really thought about it, you know, or was like, oh, I should dig into that more. Just like, Yeah, it's always run hot because it honestly, its whole life has always run hot. It's just slightly gotten worse. So that's the pro tip, dude. If you want to do a head without having a big coolant mess everywhere, just run it a little low. How tight do you think these cylinder head bolts are? I need my big ratchet. Can I get them out of here with this thing? Oh, this is fine. My baby, back row right. There's gotta be coolant in the head area here because it's leaking out of the fucking head. And that was always the other part. I was like, it's got coolant in it because it's leaking out. It's like all the guys with their old Cummins, you know? If it's leaking, it's because it's got oil, so it's fine. So the one bolt closest to the pipe does come out, but it does touch on the pipe, so I gotta thread it all the way out. That may be because this is the pipe that went into the tree and it might be a little bit crooked, but well, it's very close. There. I just had to pry the heat shield over a little bit, get that one out, and we're good to go. Cool. No major mess, so that's fun. Never mind, we're leaking. It's alright. Yeah. That's a head. Get really close here. You can see all these porous kind of pinholes in this thing. Just happened to get a not so good casting. All right, so one thing I want to point out before I keep chugging along here, when you pull the head off, you're going to get coolant in all your bolt holes here. These are all blind from what I can see. So you need to get all this coolant out of these holes before you go running your bolt in and trying to torque it. Because if you run the bolt in with all that coolant in there, it has nowhere to go, your torque spec is going to be way off, and you're most likely going to crack this cylinder somewhere. So get an air chuck or a can of compressed air or something, cover up these ports here as best you can, and blow out all your bolt holes before you go back together. Cylinder head pretty well cleaned up, all the bolt holes are blown out. I ended up ratchet strapping the back down some more because it was really difficult to get the coolant to stop leaking over this one here. It kept coming out of this port over to that port, and I just could not get that hole clean. Pushing the back of the sled down some more, ended up getting more coolant to run into the tunnel and, you know, clearing that up here. The new head is all ready to go. There's nothing really that I had to do other than just put some old plugs into the dome so that I can help hold the domes and make sure that the O-rings and the domes are seated in the new head. Like I said earlier, these are already Teflon taped and all sealed. Let's see if I can flip that over. We're all good to go there. There's really nothing else to do other than put it in. You can see a little bit of the difference here. I'm gonna try and weasel that thing down in there and get her bolted up. Biggest little help is just grabbing this main wiring harness bundle here and just kind of rolling it out of the way, and then this thing is going to drop right in here. So you need to get this main coolant hose started before you really get the head onto the cylinder. I'm going to take that spring clamp right off, and we're going to run a worm gear because that is a pain in my ass. I'm ditching the spring clamp off of here, and I'm going to run a traditional worm gear clamp. It's really tricky with this rubber boot here, and the new head, this barb is a little bit longer than the factory one, as you can see here. So this longer barb with your spring clamp pushed all the way back to this rubber elbow boot here, you just can't really slide it on all the way. So you can squeeze the clamp and slide the hose on at the same time, but it's tricky to do that without the head bolted in The head doesn't really want to bolt in with the hose on here and stuff, so it's just easier to ditch that spring clamp, throw a worm gear on it. Like I said, you can do it the other way. I just am not gonna do it that way. I'm gonna go ahead and put a regular worm gear on it and throw it back in. Covered in the instructions provided with the head, but you want to grease up the O-rings for the new head bolts just a little bit. They say take some 2-stroke oil or some grease or something, so I'm using this nice little red grease stuff I use on everything. Light little coat so that O-ring doesn't get bound up, and off you go. Cylinder head is on and snug. We went through with the little ratchet, tightened them up, kind of snug, then went through by hand, snugged them up again. Now we're doing 24 foot-pounds. Let me double check. Yeah, 24 foot-pounds with the old snap-on electric beat boop here. Go through, crisscross pattern, tighten those things up, and then a couple hoses, couple clamps, spark plug wires, knock sensor, coolant sensor, tighten them up, fill it full of coolant, off we go. Now on to what I think is kind of sort of one of the most important steps in the process, and that's putting the knock sensor back on. You want to make sure that this is torqued exactly to 168 inch-pounds. Make sure your knock sensor is torqued very appropriately right to the spec, because if you go way too tight, there's a good chance it's going to be way more sensitive to knock. Yeah, so I'm going to have to let the front down a little bit or the back up just a little bit, because right now the cylinder head is the very highest point. And I kind of want the top of this fill neck to be the highest point. I'll finagle that around, fire it up, let it run and get up the temperature, open the door, smoke the shop out, the whole bit. And then this whole project should be done and good to go. Love that. Open the door, fire it up, let it run and cycle through for a while, and see what we get. Can't breathe. Both sides of the tunnel and cooler are warm. Thermostat's opened up. We got it up to 118 degrees coolant temp. There's plenty still in the bottle. We're currently maybe 3/16 of an inch or so above the cold full line. So I'm gonna let it all cool off, leave it just like this, let it sit, see what it pulls into the system, what it doesn't, whatever. Top that off once it's all cooled back down. Button it up and hit the trail. It's not much of it is really all that tricky. You just kind of got to get in there and do it. I think the trickiest part for someone at home without a lift will be getting enough coolant out of the system in order to get those head bolt passages cleaned out. You know, you can pull the hose off of it here, but that will require pulling off some of the center console and things like that. I didn't really get to that point because I have luckily this ability to tilt the thing up on the lift and get all the coolant to run into the tunnel and everything. So that would be the hardest part, I think, if you're doing this at home without many tools. You'll have to find a way to drain a lot more coolant out of the system than I did. Once again, thank you to Devin and the boys at Indy Specialties, man. You guys crush it every single time. I haven't had a single issue with one of their products. Knock on wood, everything shows up the way it's supposed to. It installs the way it's supposed to. A great company that I just continue to do business with because their products simply work for me.